Welcome to Know Your Flow, the podcast from Femme, where we help you understand your body, embrace your cycle, and feel empowered through every phase of womanhood. Let's get flowing. Hello, and welcome back to Know Your Flow by Femme. My name's Stef. I'm one of the founders here, and I cannot believe that today we are kicking off season 3 of our podcast. Time really does fly, but I am so excited to start season 3, and there are 6 or 7 more incredible episodes coming. But I'm so excited that today is to be so profound and so interesting because it is a topic that many of us still, even as women, are uncomfortable to talk about, and that is intimacy. And there is no one better that I thought could talk to me about this subject is Cecilie from Sitre. So we are joined by her today. So she is one of 2 founders of the brand, and it's an intimacy brand redefining how we think about pleasure and wellness with a strong focus on fertility and menopause. They're on a mission to challenge the taboos around female pleasure and the position intimacy as an essential part of overall well-being. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thank you for putting spotlight on such a important topic, but yet still, filled with a lot of taboo and which can be really uncomfortable to talk about. So thank you for opening up the conversation around that.
Yeah, I mean, even this morning when I was speaking in the office about today's episode, there was still wincing of women, that work here because, I couldn't do that. I couldn't talk so open about it. But I'm actually really excited to be having this conversation, because even if it just helps one person to talk to one person about it, then it can be worth every minute that we're here today. So thank you so much for being with us. So let's just kick off with talking about what inspired you to create Sitre and position intimacy as part of overall wellness.
Yeah, so as you briefly mentioned, I'm not the only founder, but I founded it with my really good friend, Julie. We are from Denmark and based in Copenhagen, but we actually met in London, in the UK. And I think we both had sort of, 2 different ways into getting it to the world of sex wellness and intimacy. So for Julie, it was like a personal experience having to use lubricant, and she was in her early 20s, and her body was going through some changes, and she just felt a lot of shame around, is her body not working? Is she not a sexual human being? What's actually going on? And it was bringing up a lot of barriers between her and her partner. And I was also, working very fast paced in London. I've always been a sprinter type, going really fast. And then at one point I got sick with stress, and that kind of opened my journey into looking more holistically into well-being. And that's where I realized that intimacy is such a central part of our lives, but it was still kind of invisible in the way we were talking about wellness. So we talk very openly about nutrition, exercise, meditation, but kind of intimacy which is actually really deeply tied to our physical and emotional health, is still kind of treated as something separate, and shameful. So we both kind of wanted to change that. So we then started to talk to a lot of people. We did lots of surveys, and overall, we found that 80% actually felt that the products they used for intimacy was turning them off, and there was a big problem there. And then also just talking to women in different life stages, and hearing some of the common struggles that they have with intimacy during fertility, postpartum, perimenopause, and menopause, and also how isolated women can often feel in those experiences. So Sitre was kind of our way of saying intimacy and pleasure really deserves a seat at the table of wellness, because it's not a luxury. It's part of, our well-being and pleasure. We literally wouldn't be on this planet without it. And we need to treat it as something very key and important for our overall wellness. But unfortunately, none of that was really on the market when we started. So we're here to change that. I have done that the past 5 years now.
Absolutely. And you know what? Just taking from what you said there is we wouldn't be on the planet if it wasn't for intimacy. So why is it so taboo? With being in this field for 5 years and developing the brand, how do you explain why it's still so taboo? And do you think it always will be?
Well, I think especially if we talk about women, Well, I hope there's not going to be a taboo in a couple of years, but I know there's still some way to go because, the taboo around female pleasure runs really deep. And for centuries, like women's pleasure was very like ignored or stigmatized in both like media and education, where men's was a lot more normalized. I don't think that imbalance is going to disappear quickly because it's also kind of part of an overall, equality conversation. But I think the reason why there's still a lot of taboo is a lot of the stories were created by men and very, very male focused. And the way we grew up learning about, sex from porn and was from porn and Hollywood. And it very much focused on male desire. And that can lead to both boys and girls to underestimate the importance of female pleasure. And it was very much focused on, the boys' desires and, bringing very like, us being very underinformed regarding women's sexual needs. And also, like it was kind of cool with the, the male orgasm, but whereas women, it was seen as more like, dirty and something we had to hide away. Yeah, I think it was a lot to do with, the medias, the references that we grew up with, which wasn't showing like the real stories of women's pleasure. And I think when you as a woman grow up with those where it almost feels like a script and you are kind of like, but I actually feel in a different way around pleasure and those things. If you don't see those stories represented, it also kind of reinforces this taboo in a way where you're like, okay, is this actually wrong, my desires, or like what I like and what I feel and all those things. So that's why I think it is taboo. And but luckily, I think what we've seen, so we started Sitre 5 years ago. I think especially the past couple of years, it's really nice to see that a lot of stories are shared now. And I think with your platform and a lot of other players here where we shed light on a lot of different stories from a lot of women, where we talk more openly about pleasure and also from like a well-being perspective, where it's like, it's actually really good for our health. And it's actually really important to have pleasure. And like, maybe even we can learn that a good orgasm can be a really good stress reliever and those things where like, so it's much more talking about from like, a health and wellness perspective. And just sharing a lot of, different stories, which is happening. But I think there's still some way to go. And we just gotta keep, pushing through and share more and more stories so that we kind of grow this group of stories where a lot more people are going to feel like, represented and feel safe around their, exploring their different needs and desires.
It's so interesting. When I was doing the planning and research for our session today, actually inspired me. I'm in a very healthy relationship. I get married in a matter of weeks. We've been together around 6 years, but we ended up actually doing an intimacy masterclass on Saturday evening with a coach. And, not that there was any issues, but it did get me thinking when, I was planning for you coming on about the communication around intimacy. And that was what this masterclass was about. And I think what we both learned from it is communication is key, because one person might be thinking one thing, one person might be the other. And I think because sex and intimacy has always been so taboo, the communication breaks down. And then that evolves into loads of other issues. And I think that really leads us on to what I wanted to ask you with your positioning around fertility and menopause, because I know that you've done quite a lot of work in the field, and Femme obviously is a one-stop shop for fertility, and we support women all the way through to menopause. But we hear it so often that sex and intimacy through fertility issues is the first thing that is often affected and can take a lot of time to repair, because obviously it's attached to the results and trying to conceive. So what have you learned around that? And is there anything that your brand, sort of promotes in helping people that are in these very difficult stages of life when it comes to fertility? Or trying to, adapt in a healthy relationship into perimenopause and menopause when your body's physically changing, but your partner's isn't?
I mean, as you're saying, it's such a vulnerable time, and we go through a lot of physical changes. We go through a lot of like, mental difficulties. We can kind of almost feel like we're not in our bodies the same way. Like so much is going on. Like when you go through fertility treatment and you're going, you know, you're taking like hormones and all those things, and it kind of, like sex and intimacy very much become, like something scheduled and something where it's like there's a clear like, goal with having why we're having intimacy. And it kind of, like you kind of need to do it, and you kind of like, forced, where it's like it's not something where like, oh, now I'm in the mood for these kind of things. And it's like it also kind of very much narrows it down to a very, narrow way of viewing intimacy. Whereas we as a brand really want to broaden people's perspective around intimacy, because intimacy isn't just penetration sex and with the end goal of, an orgasm or, like trying to make a baby,
Yeah.
So for us, it's like, because you're going through all these, where your body's going through a lot, you're mentally going through a lot, it's putting a lot of pressure maybe on the relationship and all those things. It's I think one of the big problems with and what can force pressure on sex is often that we maybe have a very narrow idea of what sex and intimacy can be. So we often were like, oh, but I don't feel in the mood. But that's because we think there's maybe only one route to go down. And it's only like, a 3-course menu we kind of have to go through, whereas it's like, maybe it's like a big table of different things you can pick from instead, and be like, there are these small, nice, nourishing acts that we should make room for, because sometimes, and we have lots of different products for that, sometimes it can just be like, lighting a nice candle, just having a little moment, just with a nice set that can kind of, transform a mood and kind of like build a different setting. And you can be like, okay, I'm not in the mood for penetration sex, but I would actually really love for you to massage my hand or my shoulders, or, those little acts of intimacy that can also just play a really, really strong role, because it kind of, gives you support in those processes. It can also help you connect with your partner in new ways. And it can be like, where you don't feel like because it can be very sensitive with intimacy and kind of like, saying to a partner, I don't want to have sex. But if you kind of like steer it over to something else, then you can be like, but I would love to connect with you in this way. And that kind of, just makes you both more comfortable, I would say, in a way.
Yeah. That can also be quite a difficult conversation to have, because I think even with my partner, even a massage, they sometimes think it can lead to that. And I think, which was really important when we did this masterclass, again, is the communication, is that not women, and women that are going through these difficult life changes like perimenopause, their bodies are changing and their needs are changing. And I think it's about learning to change with your partner as well. And I think, having a brand like Sitre has just been, I mean, we've been working with you for over 2 years now, but it's just so welcoming to see, because it feels like the woman is being heard. I think that's how I can explain it, is that the woman's feeling is being heard, it's been transpired into a brand, and they can use that brand to, like you say, sort of get their partner to understand that I don't feel like sex tonight, but we can still feel close, like you say, with the candle and a massage, which is really powerful, really, because sometimes the pressure of having full sex when you don't want to, but you also don't want to upset your partner, you don't want their needs not to be met, can be quite a difficult sort of yin and yang to balance sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Know your body and know your flow with Temp Drop. This smart wearable tracks your temperature as you sleep, giving you accurate data to understand your cycle naturally. Head to www.femhealth.co.uk and take charge of your hormonal health today. Yeah, which really leads me on to your products. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you about is as we are a fertility online store, a lot of the products that we do are fertility based, is having the conversation around fertility safe lubricant. I mean, we do a lot of events in the UK, and a lot of women that we speak to didn't even know that you need a fertility, and not all lubricants are fertility safe.
No,
but yours are.
Yeah, well, in general, there was a lot of loops that were not safe overall, but that's what we found. So that was a big thing for us, was safety from the beginning overall, because there was lots of ingredients that could grow bad bacteria and create yeast infections. And then, of course, we know that a lot of women who go through fertility treatment, because hormones can infect your body, and you will maybe experience more dryness, so that you are in more need of lubricant and some nurturing products. That it's super important that it's safe. It's the last thing you want to worry about. There's lots of other things to worry about when you go through fertility treatment. So like, you don't need a loop that both looks like you having almost like a disease. That's what a lot of the loops look like before. And also, you don't want to worry about safety. It is supposed to help you in the moment, support you, nurture you, and just hopefully make the experience better. So safety has been very important from day one. So yeah, if you are going through fertility treatment, then you can safely use ours. We work with very natural ingredients. They're all like very allergy friendly as well. They're dermatology tested. We very much care about pH values, so that we create good balance, and it doesn't disrupt anything down there. And then we are super nerdy about the texture with our different gels and oils. We always say that our products are some of the most sensory products you can have, so you can really feel how it feels on the skin when you use those products. So the consistency and how it feels and supports is just very, very important for us. We and I think we're one of the first brands to really treat it as body care as well. So besides being super safe and supporting you in the moment with moisture or glide or what you might need, then we also look a lot at sort of like very supportive ingredients. So for instance, in our silicone gel, which is one we recommend to a lot of women going through both fertility treatment, but also for perimenopause and menopause, because it is a gel that stays on top of the skin. It's incredible for creating moisture. And because it stays on top of the skin, it also is very long lasting. And besides using a really high quality of silicone, we've also, for instance, added E-vitamin, which is incredible for if you have little scratches and irritation in your intimate area. So that is just an example of adding ingredients that's gonna go in and actually support you. And we kind of knew the good effects from E-vitamin from other skincare products. We were like, let's add that to it as well. And we also work with other ingredients like CBD, which is incredible for relaxing muscles. It's also anti-inflammatory, and because it relaxes muscles, it can be really good if you have tension in your intimate areas, which is also quite common, because actually we found out that a lot of women out there actually go tense up a lot, just almost chronically. And also just, going through fertility treatment can also add a lot of stress, which can also place itself in the body and create that extra tension in the pelvic floor. So, having ingredients that can go in, and it is a natural oil and a natural ingredient that can go in and safely, relax muscles and kind of help with relieving tensions, while also being then anti-inflammatory and just having these nice rich oils that are really nurturing and really kind for the body. So yeah, we get really nerdy about all the things and how it feels and how it's safe, and really how it makes you feel when using the products.
And that's the incredible thing about your brand, is that you can have that trust, like you say, when you're on a fertility journey. There's a million other things that you need to think about, and so having a product that's got everything in that is safe, most importantly, and is going to support your journey is exactly what you need as women. So thank you for that. Thank you for developing all your hard work, because you've helped many of women. I mean, I use the CBD myself and with my partner, and we wouldn't use anything else. It is, like you say, just relaxing. I feel like everyone has gone CBD mad a few years ago, and then there's certain products that have really stuck, and that is one of them for us. So you've built a storytelling platform alongside your products. Why is education and inclusivity such a central part of your mission?
Well, I think back to when we spoke about, taboos earlier, there's still a lot of taboos that we need to break. And I don't think products alone can break taboos. So we need to change the whole narrative and education around intimacy and pleasure. And we need to create a new context where women can feel safe to explore and learn. I mean, and I want to say we're talking a lot about women today. We are for all genders, but we obviously have a strong focus on women because we talk a lot to a different, and there are, specific needs. But we built this platform, which is feelsitre.com, because we wanted to, for us, inclusivity is non-negotiable. Like, if intimacy is a universal human experience, then the conversation about it must also be much more inclusive. And as I said earlier, like how we learned about sex as women was very narrow and still with the same references from porn in Hollywood, but that's not real life, So we want to share like very diverse stories across different ages and backgrounds and sexualities. So whether that's, women who are going through fertility treatment, how that affects them, whether it's just not just someone who's been pregnant, where they've felt a change in their desires and needs. So for instance, we've interviewed a woman where like, she was like, I felt so sexy when I was pregnant and, and my partner wasn't feeling the same way. So what kind of difficulties was there? And, us just all kinds of different stories, because women can feel in so many different ways and can have so many different desires and needs. And it's only going to be like that for the rest of our lives. We're going to go through changes in lives, whether that's going through fertility treatment, perimenopause, or just generally going through life, where we experience maybe some physical difficulties, emotional difficulties, or just learn about ourselves, and find new ways that we want to explore. So that platform is so important. And we also get a lot of, responses from people where they were like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one having this problem, like even women in their early 20s was like, I thought I was the only one who needed to use a lubricant. And I thought it was because I wasn't a sexual human being, whereas like now I know there's like hormonal changes and all these things that can affect them. And it is actually quite normal. So yeah, they're a huge part. And it's also a way for us to push media out there. We're happy to see that a lot of like media out there also like, sharing a lot more stories, but it's kind of our way to kind of, start a lot more like conversations in media in general around it and put spotlight on much needed stories around women and pleasure and,
absolutely. But when I was driving to work this morning, I was thinking, and I did want to ask you, where do you sit with teachings in school around intimacy? Because, I mean, look, it's been, a fair few years since I was in the school system, but it felt very much like this is sex, this is the biology of sex, but don't get pregnant. That was sort of the story. And then, as soon as I'm like 15, 16, put on a contraceptive pill. And that was the conversation, Do you think that we need to be taught around intimacy much younger within the curriculum or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still remember, like when I think back at mine, it was about safety and it was about learning to put a condom on a banana. That's what I feel like I can remember. There was nothing around pleasure from like, health and well-being perspective. Like no one talked about, it's not just for making babies or trying to be safe from trying not to make, it wasn't like they didn't talk about, oh, this is actually incredible for your well-being. I mean, and also talking more openly about masturbation, for instance. And I will like, now it gets a little personal, but I will use masturbation if I'm super stressed. It's a really good stress reliever. Like, and and I think especially young kids and people, they're also going to go through a lot of mental difficulties. So if we could talk about like how you can also use it, and also talk about, empowering people to feel more open and exploring, even just with themselves, with vibrators and all these sex tools and toys. we definitely need to talk about it from, from a pleasure point of view, and the sort of like, the really good health benefits that it
I know.
has.
I think the health
Because
benefits are key. I suffer really bad from migraines, and it's one of the
yeah,
first things I will do because it completely relieves the pressure.
yeah,
But I had to figure that out myself. Nobody was openly telling me on the benefits of having an orgasm, and like you say, stress and
yeah.
relaxing, getting you to sleep, helping with sleep. And I think they're the things. And has to be a fine line, in
Mm.
the depths of the teachings at school. But I think the conversation needs to be much more open. I was like you, exactly, just the condom on the banana, and it just felt very guided towards men again.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that sex is always going to be, a topic where it's like there's a fine line between it being too vulgar or, crossing boundaries and stuff. But I think what we've worked on a lot is actually finding new words for how we talk about intimacy as well. So a lot of what it was also very much, like kinky, dirty, like you have to be a little sex kitten and those things where it's like, no, it can also be kind and soft and mindful and something. It's really about connection and connecting with yourself and a partner. And we've also worked a lot on the, like, the visual side of portraying intimacy, because it was still very much, that sexiness was very much tied to a look, and you have to look and act a certain way, where like we're like, no, sexiness is a feeling, like, and if you can feel things, you can feel sexy. And we need to also portray intimacy in new ways that are, never pornographic, but still shows like no real intimacy and connecting and showing real bodies, and how you can also connect and through massages and hugging and all those like little acts and things,
Mm.
where we can show that, so that sex isn't just what you see in the porn movies or what you see in the Hollywood films. This is also intimacy. These are also very important things to have in your
Absolutely.
life as, as part of your well-being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this conversation today. Just listening to you talk, I'm thinking of all the things that Femme can do to support our community, and I'm sure there's many other things that we've already discussed that we can do together just to help that message in, because it is so important. So what's next for Sitre? Is there any inside scoop you can give us?
Yeah, well, so I feel like although we're 5 years in, we're just getting started, because it's been we kind of had to build a whole new category and a whole new culture and conversation around intimacy. But we're planning to continue to expand our product range, and we kind of have two tiers in Citrus. So we have like, the overall goal is just to, for us to, prioritize intimacy and pleasure in general. And then there's a more like sort of health perspective of it as well, which is, having products for when you go through these like, changes in your life, so that we make sure that you have these very safe and nurturing products if you are going through like, fertility treatment, all those. But also just, very inspired by the wellness world. I continue to develop products where you're like, just like we did with the candle, this is something nice you want to have in your home, and it's a nice little easy thing. You can light a candle, and then you can like, incorporate intimacy in your daily life. So we're looking at a lot of different interesting ideas of really nice products that you just want to use and you want to incorporate in your lives, that kind of enables you to have a lot more intimacy in your everyday. And then we continue to build on our storytelling platform, and also, yeah, just want to be a companion for women at every stage in their life, not just with products, but with education, community, and connection, really. Stay tuned for products and also stories, and a lot of partnerships in pushing all these very, very important conversations around women and pleasure and intimacy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for letting us stock your brand. So just for our listeners then, your products are available on femme.co.uk, but where else can they find your storytelling? Are you most active on Instagram?
Yeah, we're very active on Instagram. where we share a lot of, stories. We also show a lot of behind the scenes of being a female founder, and running a sex wellness brand and all the things you go through that. And we talk about, when we test products. And I think today we just shared like a little story about like things we talk about in the office that are like, so we try to get quite personal as well for you to kind of get to know us behind, and also show that we're as much women going through all these things as well. And it very much comes from, personal, inspiration, but also a need to help other women. So please do connect with us on Instagram. And if you want the articles that I spoke about earlier, then it's like feelsitre.com. And our Instagram is also feelsitre. So we would love to connect in there. We also very open about, DMs in there with questions. It's very important for us that it's a safe space where you can also reach out and ask all kinds of questions. And there are no wrong questions.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And I've really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope our listeners too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And it was really cozy. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.